I knew I'd regret scheduling that meeting the second I stepped into her lavender-scented office and saw her little gold nameplate, Darla S., VP of Culture. Culture, my ass. The only culture Darla had was a petri dish of entitlement, carefully cultivated in her husband's shadow and fertilized by corporate nepotism. She was propped behind her desk like a toddler in a high chair, all fake pearls and performative empathy, nodding like she was listening but clearly just waiting for her turn to talk. I came prepared, 7 years of receipts. Literal ones, actually. I had hard numbers, cost savings I'd implemented, regulatory nightmares I'd dodged for them, code patches I'd written myself at 2 a.m. that kept the damn platform from falling apart during the last audit. I wasn't asking for the moon. I was asking for equity with a junior analyst who still confused VPN with GPS. She gave me a tight-lipped smile that made me feel like I was asking for a kidney. Then she leaned back, twirled her pen, and said, "It's not the right climate for raises, Joyce." I stayed quiet. I've learned there's power in silence, especially when someone expects you to grovel. But then came the kicker. She closed her little leather notebook, pushed it aside like I was crumbs on her desk, and added, "Be thankful you still have a job." That's when something inside me didn't just crack, it calcified. I sat there for a second too long, nodding like a bobblehead on lithium, letting her think she'd won something. I knew better than to argue. She wanted a reaction. Tears, a speech, maybe even a slammed door. I gave her none of it, just a calm smile and a thank you for your time. The truth, that moment didn't crush me. It clarified things. I wasn't invisible. I was underestimated. Again. And before we go any further, hey, real quick, if you're listening to this and haven't hit that subscribe or like button yet, give it a tap. 90% of folks don't, and believe me, it really helps the team keep this going. Plus, it's cheaper than therapy and way more satisfying. Now, back to Darla's lavender layer of passive aggression. When I walked out of that office, I didn't cry. I didn't vent. I went back to my desk, pulled up a blank doc, and started a new file titled Contingencies. Because what Darla didn't know, and what made her little power trip extra amusing in hindsight, was that half of this company ran on a system I built. Not suggested, built, from scratch. She didn't know that the compliance framework keeping our entire ops legal, mine. That the backend logic powering our contracts and international vendor workflows, mine. And she definitely didn't know that 2 years ago, during one of her husband's strategic tax maneuvers, I agreed to license that very platform under a temporary LLC for optimization purposes. His idea, my paperwork. It was supposed to be temporary, just a structure to move things around cleanly during a merger. There was even an understanding, a loose one, written on a post-it and witnessed by an intern, that the LLC would stay in my name until further notice. Guess what never came? As I watched my access slowly shrink and my projects reassigned to people who couldn't code a toaster, I didn't panic. I documented. Quietly, methodically, like a woman building a fire while everyone else was busy sucking on ice cubes. By the time they started parading around my platform like it was some collective brainchild, I'd already spoken to a private attorney, had my terms drafted, re-registered the LLC, set up the invoice system. The fuse was already lit, they just didn't know it yet. The first thing they took was the calendar invites. No warning, no hey, we're pivoting the team structure, just silence where meetings used to be. The Thursday compliance sync, gone. Monday morning product stand-ups, vanished. Friday check-ins with legal, poof. At first, I thought it was a mistake. I even emailed Julia from operations. "Hey, looks like I got dropped from the stakeholder list, mind re-adding me?" No reply. A week later, I asked in person. She blinked twice, looked like she was about to say something, then just said, "I think Darla's streamlining workflows." Maybe talk to her, Darla, of course, queen of synergy and soft firings. That Monday, my two direct reports, Matt and Amira, were reassigned. Just like that. No exit conversation, no project handover. They were told I was focusing on back-end strategy and wouldn't be needing a team. Back-end strategy, my ass. They gutted my arm just to see how long I'd bleed without screaming. Then came the junior analyst, Tanner. Tanner, who once asked me if audit trail was an actual path. Tanner, who printed out Google results like citations. Suddenly, he was the rising star. He started spouting ideas I'd written in internal docs months ago. Verbatim, maybe we need a proactive compliance log, something automated with dynamic triggers? Gee, Tanner, sounds familiar. Almost like the document I shared during Q2 postmortem, the one you were too busy Instagramming your sandwich to read. I sat through those meetings like a statue carved from frustration. Darla would nod thoughtfully at Tanner, like he'd just discovered fire, while the rest of the room nodded along in groupthink harmony. Every part of me wanted to stand up and start listing dates, file names, git commits, Slack messages, but I didn't, not yet. Instead, I started making copies. I pulled every system credential, every compliance doc I'd authored, every version log with my initials next to the timestamp. I exported it all to a secure encrypted drive, backed it up twice. Then I emailed it to myself. Subject line, record, do not delete. I included my original contract, the NDA from the LLC formation. Even a photo I'd snapped of that damn sticky note with the director's signature and the words, "You'll hold the LLC until we figure taxes." They thought they were erasing me from the room. I was writing the script they didn't know they'd perform in. Every time I passed Darla in the hallway, she gave me this Stepford smile, like she'd already buried my career in the community garden next to her herb spiral and framed vision board. She once asked, chipper as ever, "How's the new headspace without so many meetings?" "Quiet," I said, "productive." She giggled like I'd complimented her perfume and skipped off to her next culture circle. They thought stripping my visibility meant stripping my value. But I don't work for applause. I work in the shadows. And shadows remember everything. I didn't tell anyone, not friends, not coworkers, not even my sister. What was there to say? Hey, I'm being slowly excommunicated by a woman whose greatest innovation was scented break room candles? No, this wasn't the kind of war you fought out loud. This was siege warfare. And I was building catapults behind the walls. The email subject line alone made my teeth itch. Seedling new synergy review process, let's grow together. Darla had apparently decided what our company needed wasn't better infrastructure or less burnout. It was mandatory team synergy reviews, a phrase that sounds like it was invented by a sentient kombucha SCOBY. According to the rollout deck, which included a slide titled Empathic Disruption, we'd all be assessed quarterly based on how well we cultivated warmth and participated in collaborative optimism. I'd spent the last 7 years preventing six-figure compliance fines and rebuilding a legacy platform duct taped together by someone's nephew in 2011. Now my job security depended on how often I used exclamation points in Slack. You ever seen a woman with 2 degrees and a six-figure infrastructure portfolio get a needs attitude adjustment rating? I have. Me. In the little review form, my manager, Reed Darla, wearing her manager hat this week, wrote, "Joyce is highly knowledgeable but can come off as detached and unapproachable. We'd love to see more playful energy in her contributions." Playful energy. Lady, I'm 1404 error away from setting this entire company on fire with a stapler and an old Ethernet cable. But sure, let me work on my vibes. Real kicker came 2 days later when I tried to run a routine system check on our third-party vendor compliance logs and found myself locked out. Permission denied. I refreshed. Tried again. Denied. 20 minutes later, one of the interns pinged me. "Hey, do you know why our vendor compliance log is blank?" Of course it was blank. That system ran through me. Literally. I'd written the core logic, API hooks, and dynamic logging myself. They thought they could remove me from the systems like I was an expired password, but they forgot the systems needed me to function. I didn't reply to the intern. I just logged the failed audit in a spreadsheet labeled control points, added the date and time, and tucked it away in my contingency folder. From that point forward, I turned every failure into ammunition. Every time a sync failed, every time a logic module timed out because someone didn't know the difference between a hard refresh and a soft delete, I documented it. I opened a new file titled Legacy System Dependency and began listing every component I had built, authored, or repaired. Compliance Sync Module, authored by J. Barrett, 2019 Audit Response Logic, written by J. Barrett, 2020, after Q3 Blackout Vendor Trigger Tree, patched by J. Barrett after legal flagged discrepancy, I pulled access logs, saved the commit histories, took screenshots of Slack threads where I'd solved issues that entire teams couldn't touch with a 10-foot pole and a prayer. I started acting like a guest in my own company, smiling, nodding, answering when called upon, but never volunteering more than was asked. Darla liked to think she was leading a renaissance. What she didn't realize was that she was killing the goose that laid the golden API. One afternoon, she popped by my desk with a mug that said "Good vibes only" and chirped, "We'd love for you to join the team meditation lunch next week. Just a little breathwork and bonding." I blinked. I'm allergic to gluten-free enlightenment. She laughed like I was joking. I wasn't. That week, she sent out a company-wide email announcing a new platform refactor initiative, encouraging all departments to collaborate cross-functionally to reimagine the backend. Translation: they were going to try rebuilding the systems I'd created without me based on Tanner's fresh eyes. Good luck, kids. Hope you brought floaties. Because I'd already started talking to someone. Not a friend, not a recruiter, a lawyer. Quiet, sharp, NDA bound, and very, very interested in the structure of that LLC Darla's husband helped me file 2 years ago. They wanted synergy. They were about to get structure. It started with a lunch. Not the kind with wine and clinking forks. This was a beige conference room, dry chicken wraps, and a printout titled Structural Optimization, Compliance Platform Entity Flow. The director, Elliot, king of half-truths in a tailored blazer, leaned over the table with that oily charm of his, pointing at a diagram shaped like a corporate intestine. "Okay, so, to clean up the books before next year's audit," he said, "we need to move the compliance platform temporarily into an external shell." I remember blinking at him like he'd just asked me to transfer the deed to my organs. He kept going. "Not forever, just a quick LLC. You'd be the point of contact, but we'd transfer it back post-merger." Purely a tax thing. The lawyers are fine with it. Standard stuff. Standard my ass. Still, back then, I trusted him. Or at least I trusted that he needed me more than he needed to screw me. He framed it as a compliment. We want you in control of the system because no one else understands it like you do. I took that bait, but I brought a hook of my own. I told him I'd agree on paper, so long as the LLC remained in my name until the ownership was officially transferred. Until then, I would retain full rights. Absolutely, Elliot said. Totally fair. Let's put that in writing. And he did, on a document with legal letterhead and dotted lines. We both signed it right there, him with his favorite blue Mont Blanc, me with the suspicion of someone who's seen one too many handshakes rot into lawsuits. I folded the agreement, slid it into my notebook, and wrote one word on a sticky note: temp hold my name until transfer. He signed that too, half-jokingly, like it was just a formality. I'll owe you for this, he said. Yeah, Elliot, you would. Flash forward 2 years. By the time Darla was holding her little synergy sermons, and Tanner was busy plagiarizing my legacy code like it was fan fiction, that memory came back to me like a fire alarm in a silent house. It hit me while I was reaching into my old desk drawer for a charger I hadn't used since pre-COVID. Beneath a jumble of thumb drives and expired granola bars, there it was, folded neatly. Edges soft from time, that original agreement, my signature, his signature, legalese so dense it could bend light, and right on top, pressed to the page like a final stamp of karma, was that faded sticky note. Temp hold my name until transfer. Blue ink, his initials, dated. I held it like it was radioactive, because in that moment I remembered something Elliot didn't. He never filed the transfer. They'd built an empire on top of my system, hired, pitched, expanded, and yet the licensing rights? Still sitting quietly in the name of an entity I controlled. It was like finding a loaded gun under your mattress after a break-in. I'd forgotten I even had it. The LLC still existed. No dissolution, no reassignment, just a dusty corporate skeleton waiting to rise. I scanned the sticky note, uploaded it to my encrypted folder. Then I made 3 color copies of the full license agreement, signed and stamped, mailed them to 3 different locations. No names, just for legal use only on the envelopes. That night I sat on my balcony with a mug of chamomile and watched the city lights flicker like synapses. They thought I was out of the game, but what they didn't know was I owned the board. They just hadn't noticed my piece still sitting in the middle. The email subject line was so chirpy it could have had jazz hands. Rocket prepping for expansion? Let's make magic happen. Inside, Elliot had forwarded a bullet point summary of the new product line the board was about to vote on. A high-risk, high-reward vertical that would position us at the forefront of regulatory tech innovation. Translation: they were about to stack the company's future on the very system they'd been trying to erase me from for the past 6 months. The system I still owned. But they didn't know that, yet. In the email, Elliot ended with, Joyce, can you whip up the internal policy doc this week? Just the usual risk matrices and compliance escalation ladders. We're presenting it Friday. Oh, sure. Let me just gift wrap the skeleton key to my own system and hand it to the people who gave me a synergy score lower than a ficus. But I didn't flinch. I wrote it, neatly, precisely, every clause legally sound, every footnote sourced. I included the precise data flow mappings and embedded language that would make any lawyer salivate. It was airtight, but I knew better than to leave fingerprints. So I created the doc using my work credentials, saved it to the internal drive, and waited. 3 days later, I saw the final board packet. The policy doc was in there, word for word. But where my name should have been listed under contributing authors, it simply said, Internal Ops Team. Not even a courtesy initial. I didn't forward it. I didn't reply. I didn't rage slam my keyboard like I wanted to. I just stared at the PDF like it was a body I already knew the cause of death for. Calculated silence. That's what it took, because the moment had finally arrived. That night, I met with the attorney I'd vetted months earlier. Quiet office. Non-disclosure already signed. He poured me chamomile tea like this was a therapy session. I think it's time. I said we draft the licensing agreement. He didn't even blink. Flat rate or usage-based? Usage, I replied, and I want it to compound. We drafted it line by line. My LLC, the same shell Elliot helped me register, would now be a formal licensing entity. Any commercial deployment of the compliance framework would trigger a usage fee, starting at $50,000 per day, backdated only to the point of product launch. I wasn't greedy, just precise. Clause 7.2 outlined the commercial trigger. Clause 9.4 detailed breach consequences. Clause 11 made it very clear that no license had been transferred. And then, we added the teeth. Continued use of proprietary systems without contract acknowledgement will be treated as willful infringement. Enforcement options include injunctive relief and statutory damages. I initialed every page. He notarized it. He printed 2 clean copies, sealed in legal envelopes. One went into a safe deposit box. The other, scheduled to arrive at the company's legal department the morning of the board meeting. I walked out of that office into the cool night air and didn't feel triumphant. I felt ready, like a conductor stepping onto the podium, baton in hand, watching the orchestra tune their instruments, unaware the sheet music had already changed. The expansion they were celebrating was being built on a platform I had already reclaimed, and the countdown had begun. I filed the paperwork at 7:43 a.m. sharp on a Tuesday. Online registration. State database. LLC name untouched for 2 years, just waiting like a dormant volcano with my signature still etched into its soil. I didn't even need to change the name, just updated the business purpose from temporary tax compliance structure to technology licensing entity enterprise regulatory systems. I clicked submit. The confirmation pinged my inbox like a loaded gun clicking into place. Then came the terms. I uploaded the new licensing agreement to the LLC portal, the one my attorney and I had spent weeks polishing until it gleamed with legal finality. Usage fee, $50,000/day. Trigger, commercial deployment without active contract, breach penalty, immediate cease and desist notice, enforceable via civil injunction. I wasn't bluffing. I wasn't posturing. This wasn't some empty HR complaint about being undervalued. This was ownership, on paper, on record. On the very damn server their expansion depended on. They'd paraded around my system like it was communal property. Like they could just copy/paste my life's work into a PowerPoint and sell it to the board with a bow on top. So I sent the invoice. Quietly. Not to Elliot, not to Darla. Certainly not to Tanner, who was probably still Googling what intellectual property meant. I sent it directly to the company's legal department, marked confidential. Immediate review required. The attached document included the following line, front and center. Ongoing commercial usage of the J. Barrett regulatory platform, V2.3 Plus, is subject to contractual terms per updated licensing policy, effective immediately. The invoice itself was clean, no emotion, just numbers. One commercial deployment event, $50,000 days in use projected, one payment due. Upon receipt and just to be polite, I included a line at the bottom. If you believe this invoice was sent in error, please refer to the original licensing agreement signed by Elliot M. Dated March 7, 20XX. Then I scheduled the email, not for Tuesday, not for Wednesday. Friday, 9:03 a.m., 3 minutes after the board meeting was scheduled to begin, because I knew something they didn't. Legal doesn't sit in the room until things get real. Nothing screams real like a $50K/day surprise landing in your inbox mid-presentation. Friday arrived with terrifying normalcy. Darla walked around in a dress she called Boardroom playful, holding her favorite lavender clipboard and a thermos labeled Hustle Juice. Tanner wore a blazer 2 sizes too big, probably borrowed from his dad. He cornered me at the coffee machine. Big day, huh? I smiled. Sure is. They thought they were heading into a coronation. I knew it was a reckoning. Legal was quiet that morning, too quiet. No chatter, no printer noise, no candy wrapper crinkling behind the cubicles. Then, around 10:12 a.m., the silence cracked. An internal message pinged someone in IT. Can you confirm the system backbone we're deploying is the J. Barrett platform? 5 minutes later, another ping. This time to finance. Did we ever finalize the licensing transfer from the original LLC? Can't find documentation. By 10:30, I saw the doors to the legal conference room close. No noise came out, no one came in. I didn't even need to attend the board meeting, because at that moment they were scrambling. They were finally asking the one question they should have asked 2 years ago. Who owns the tech and legal? They had the answer. They'd pulled the registration, the notarized contract, the absence of any transfer filing. The LLC still active, still mine. That was the turning point. Not a fight, not a confrontation. Just a fact. Quiet, heavy, irrefutable. I sat at my desk, sipping lukewarm coffee, while a $50,000 invoice detonated the illusion of control they'd built on top of my silence. The boardroom was buzzing in that artificial, sugar-high way corporate people hum when they think they're about to make history. Fresh fruit platters, sparkling water in glass bottles no one actually opened. An easel with 2025 strategic growth agenda scrawled across it in faux energetic blue marker. Elliot was in his zone, wingtips polished, tie symmetrical. Hairline aggressively combed to look less tragic under the LED lights. He paced like a preacher, waving his hands just enough to look passionate but not enough to sweat through his Brooks Brothers. The numbers speak for themselves, he said, laser pointer flicking across the screen. We're positioned to scale at a velocity that makes our competitors irrelevant. And the beauty? He tapped the slide with a grin that could sterilize houseplints. It's all built on our proprietary systems. Our systems. I sat in the back, invisible as ever. Not even a nameplate, just the note taker. Silent compliance gremlin who somehow still got invited because they needed someone to spot check acronyms on the fly. Across the room, Darla was perched next to Elliot like an emotionally intelligent parrot, nodding at everything he said before he finished the sentence. She leaned in toward the CFO and whispered, Q2 bonuses are going to look real cute if this clears. I didn't look at her. I just tapped my pen slowly against the table, counting the seconds. 9:03 a.m. The lawyer coughed once, just once. It wasn't loud, but it cut through the room like a paper slicer through an HR pamphlet. Elliot paused mid-sentence, smiling. You good, Greg? Greg cleared his throat again and adjusted his laptop. No smile, no eye contact, just the voice of a man who had already gone through all 7 stages of legal grief in the past 20 minutes. Before we proceed with final approval, he said, there's a licensing matter we need to address. The oxygen left the room. Elliot chuckled, like this was all just a bureaucratic speed bump. Licensing? Oh, that must be about the vendor integration clause. Yeah, we've got that handled. It's our platform. Greg didn't blink. Elliot tried again, this time with that diplomatic charm offensive he used on investors. Greg, if this is about the data tools, those are in-house, built right here. Our systems, our team, our. Greg finally looked up. Who owns the tech, he asked. Elliot laughed, a full laugh, palms up like, come on, guys, what do you mean who owns it? We've built on it for years. It's internal IP. The backend logic is housed on our own infrastructure. Hell, we moved it into ops during the last restructuring, Joyce. Didn't we move it under ops? I didn't answer, because that question wasn't meant for me. He was asking the room, asking legal, asking the universe to validate the fantasy that he was still in control. Greg turned the laptop toward him. One file open, one tab, a licensing agreement, dated, notarized, and staring Elliot dead in the face like a ghost he forgot to bury. And just beneath it, the name of the active LLC owner. My name. Elliot's lips parted. No sound came out. Darla leaned forward to see the screen and made this tiny squeak in the back of her throat. Wait, isn't that some kind of placeholder? That's not real. Greg's voice was calm. Surgical, it's valid. The LLC registration is live and there's no record of a transfer, which means all commercial deployment tied to the compliance framework now in use is subject to the terms outlined in this agreement. Silence. The kind of silence that doesn't breathe, it waits. Elliot's smile slipped off his face like wet paint. He looked at Greg, then at the board, then at me. I didn't flinch because this wasn't a surprise. It was an arrival, and he was just now realizing who had been waiting at the station the whole time. The laptop screen glowed like it had a soul. Just one page, one name. Greg didn't say anything at first. He simply swiveled the laptop around, the hinge creaking under the weight of what was coming. Elliot leaned in, still wearing that twitchy half-grin CEOs slap on when they think they've got a grip on things. That smirk lasted about 3 seconds, then he saw it. J. Barrett Regulatory Systems, LLC, License Agreement Effective, March 7, 20XX, signed by Joyce Barrett, co-signed Elliot M. I watched his face freeze like a hard reset. He blinked once, twice. The smirk didn't fade, it died, rotted right there in real time. Across the table, the board chair, a man who usually kept his input to eyebrow raises and strategic sighs, leaned forward slowly. He didn't speak. He just stared at Elliot like he was waiting for him to finish choking on his own ego. Darla squinted at the screen like the pixels were lying. Her mouth opened slightly, as if preparing to release another condescending chirp. But instead she stammered, this can't be right. Isn't this some kind of placeholder? Or an early draft? Greg finally responded, not to her but to the room. This is the executed licensing agreement filed with the Secretary of State, along with the notarized signature pages. There is no record of transfer, dissolution, or internal reassignment. He paused. That LLC still exists. It is the sole rights holder of the compliance system the company's expansion depends on. No raised voices. No finger pointing. Just silence. And not the good kind. The kind that creeps up your spine when you realize the elevator cable has snapped and the fall has already begun. Elliot swallowed, hard. But we've been using that system for, Greg cut him off almost gently. Without a valid license, yes. Darla's eyes darted between faces, looking for someone to throw her a rope. But it's been 2 years. Joyce worked here. Doesn't that count for something? I tilted my head, finally speaking for the first time all meeting. Depends. You mean legally or ethically? She flushed, said nothing. Greg closed the laptop softly, as if sealing the tomb. Then he slid a fresh folder across the table. Per legal protocol, we're advising the board to suspend any forward motion on the expansion until this is resolved. In the meantime, the company is considered in breach of licensing terms. The chair didn't argue. He didn't blink. Just leaned back, interlaced his fingers, and exhaled like a man who'd just been handed the first honest piece of paper in months. I sat still, hands folded, the pulse in my neck finally slowing. Not gloating, not grinning, just seen. After months of being sidelined, erased, and turned into a ghost behind her own architecture, I was now the most real thing in the room. And the irony, they had all done it to themselves. They'd cut me out, stepped over me, stripped me of meetings and titles and fake awards for culture alignment. But they forgot one thing. Ownership is not about applause. It's about receipts. And mine just lit the fuse. The board reconvened after a 20-minute recess that felt like a war council wrapped in a panic attack. I didn't get up, didn't need to. I knew what was being said behind that frosted glass door, knew the math they were doing. Daily breach penalties times projected rollout timeline equals financial self-destruction. By the time they returned, the temperature of the room had shifted from espresso-hyped optimism to cold, regulatory dread. The chair spoke first, voice level. We're voting to suspend the expansion project until the licensing matter is formally resolved. No debate, no counterpoint. Elliot didn't object. He didn't speak at all. He just stared at the tabletop like it owed him an apology. Then came the second wave. HR was called in, quietly. They didn't even sit, just handed the chair a sealed envelope. The announcement was casual, surgical. We're asking Director M to take a leave of absence effective immediately, pending review. Darla made a noise like a tea kettle being smothered. What? Wait, why me? I didn't. The chair didn't look at her. Your appointment was tied directly to his authority. As that's now in question, your role is being retired. Retired, not reassigned, not repurposed, just deleted. No one clapped, no one said goodbye. It was like a purge in slow motion. I sat still. No victory lap, no smirk, my hands were steady. My breath even. The chair turned to me next. Joyce, we'd like to discuss a new contract structure. Competitive compensation. You retain LLC ownership. Course, we'd like to formalize ongoing use of the platform with proper licensing. He looked almost embarrassed, like it hurt to acknowledge how badly they'd messed up. I nodded once. I'll review terms. They didn't rush me, didn't dare. When I stood, the room parted like a zipper, not out of respect, out of realization. They'd all been operating under a myth that silence equals weakness, but silence had just rewritten their future. I stepped into the hallway, the door swinging shut behind me like the punctuation mark on an old chapter. No one followed, no applause, no music swelling in the background, just the soft hum of the HVAC and the hollow click of my boots on cheap vinyl tile. I walked to my desk, sat down, logged in, pulled up the original license agreement, attached it to a blank email. To legal subject per our updated terms, no body text. Nothing more to say. I hit send. Then I leaned back, no smile, no fist pump, just breathing, because it wasn't revenge, it was reclamation. The system they tried to steal, the woman they tried to erase, both were still here, and from now on, they'd pay to keep them. Big thanks for watching, you sneaky seniors. Subscribe to keep the coffee pot brewing revenge. Your ex-colleagues won't know what hit 'em.